So now we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations, and today we're going to focus specifically on factoring. Take a moment, set up your notes, quadratic equations, Unit 6A, Homework 3 with the appropriate date. Make sure you have questions and comments labeled on the side, and then today's title, Solving Quadratic Equations Through Factoring. So let's start with your standard quadratic equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and factor our quadratic equation. So remember, you're going to go ahead and take C, 6, and we're going to find all the factors of 6. And then we want factors that multiply to give us 6, but will add to give us 5. And so that's going to be 2 and 3. So we're going to basically rewrite our quadratic as factors, x plus 2 times x plus 3. Next, we want to go ahead and take each factor and set it equal to 0. So x plus 2 is going to be x plus 2 equal to 0, and x plus 3 will be x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now we just need to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and that'll give me x equals negative 2. Next, I subtract 3 from both sides, and that gives me x equals negative 3. These are going to be my solutions, or my x-intercepts. I need to make sure I check my solutions to make sure that they actually work. So I'm going to take negative 2, and I'm going to plug it back into the original equation. Notice I used parentheses when plugging in my negative 2 to my x. Simplify, and I get 0 equals 0, which makes sure that this solution works. So let's go ahead and check out negative 3. Is that one going to work? I'm going to plug it into my original equation and then simplify. And then this one works. 0 is equal to 0. Let's take a look at another example, but before going on, go ahead and pause and copy. So here's my next example. X squared minus 3 equals 2x. One of the things you have to remember is that in order to solve a quadratic equation through factoring, the quadratic must be set equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides to get it to the left so I can set it equal to 0. And then I have it in standard form. X squared minus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So the steps are going to be the same. We're going to factor the quadratic. So we take the c value of negative 3. And because the 3 is negative 3, I know one of my factors has to be the positive, the other has to be the negative. What multiplies to give me negative 3 and adds to give me a negative 2? And that's x minus 3 times x plus 1. Once I have my factors, I'm going to go ahead and set them equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. Now all I need to do is solve each one for x. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides here, and that gives me x equals 3. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides here, and that's going to give me x equals negative 1. So these are my x-intercepts. This is where I'm hitting the x-axis for my solutions. So now I need to check my solutions by taking my x-intercepts and plugging them back into the original equation to solve. So once again, use parentheses when you're plugging your 3 in. Simplify. And I get 6 equals 6, which is true. Now let's go ahead and plug our negative 1 back in. Once again, using parentheses. And simplify. And I get negative 2 equals negative 2, which proves true. Go ahead and pause and copy, and then we'll take a look at another possible example you would see. So here's our next example. It's x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 12. Remember that your quadratic must be set equal to 0. So we need to take this 12, and we need to subtract it from both sides so we can get 0 over here. And so that's going to give me x squared plus 5x minus 6, because when we do 6 minus 12, we get a negative 6. So next, we need to go ahead and factor our equation. Once again, we take negative 6, and we find the factors that will make negative 6 when we multiply, and 5 when we add. And that's going to give me x minus 1 and x plus 6. Once again, when I multiply, it gives me a negative 6. When I add them, they give me a 5. So now I take my two factors and I set it equal to 0. X minus 1 equals 0 and x plus 6 equals 0. Now I need to go ahead and solve for my x value. So here I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I get x equals 1. Here I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 6. Once again, these are my solutions, my roots, my zeros. They are my x-intercepts. I need to check both solutions to make sure that it works. So I'm going to go ahead and take 1, and I'm going to plug it back into the original equation, and then I simplify. And I get 12 equals 12, which proves true. Next, I go ahead and plug in my negative 6, using those parentheses to avoid possible errors or mistakes, and I simplify. And I get 12 equals 12, which also proves true. Go ahead and take a moment, pause, copy before continuing on. So here I have x squared plus 5x equals 0. Now, you're going to notice it is set equal to 0. That's a great thing, but there's a little problem here. I'm going to factor this, but since I don't have a c term, I'm not going to factor it the way I normally would. This is where I'm going to have to fall back onto what I remember from polynomials. And this is where I'll factor an x out of both terms, and that leaves me with x plus 5. So x times x plus 5. I'm going to set both factors equal to 0, x and x plus 5. And then once I set them equal, I can go ahead and solve for x. Now my first term is already solved. It's x equals 0. So all I need to worry about is my second term. X plus 5 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 5. So my solution, or my x-intercepts, are x equals 0 and x equals negative 5. Once again, you need to check both of them. And so I'm going to take 0 and plug it into my original equation, and then I simplify. And I get 0 equals 0, which proves true. Now let's try negative 5. Once I plug in negative 5, go ahead and simplify. And I get 0 equals 0, which does prove true. Now here's some try it out. I have 3 different quadratic equations here, modeling all the different possible types that we've done during this notes. Go ahead, solve each quadratic equation by factoring. And we'll go over your answers in class when we next meet. Go ahead, take a moment, pause, copy, and then good luck on your try it out.